as we continue to watch this, rise in the socialist movement, completely out of the closet, completely out in the open, attacking the foundations of this nation, attacking the great and rich history and heritage. We are seeing the results of it all over. I got to tell you, I think the answer to that is to revive not just good political figures and good electoral candidates that we put into office. The answer really, as I've said often, is to go back to the culture. We see so many young Americans simply stop working, get out of the labor market. There's too much to participate in from programs and safety nets. We see a lot of folks kind of adopt this victimhood mentality. There's an excuse or a blame as to why they're not able to get what they think they ought to be able to, or what they're following people online who've worked very hard. You fill in the blank. There are so many parts and pieces of this. I want to tell you, though, I think one of the things we do is really revive a sense of pride in work, of pride in our nation, of virtue and morality, yet again, in our nation, something that is lost in great part. And there's a new documentary out. I still need to sit down and watch the entire thing, but I want to tell you a little bit about it because it intrigues me very much. Produced by Ned Ryan, if you're not familiar with him, American Majority, really, really neat guy inside the conservative movement, very solid on the principles, also very in tune with how to actually go out and win. Voter Gravity, one of the systems that they run, does a really remarkable job assisting grassroots campaigns across the country. But a new documentary produced by Ned Ryan, The Thread of Liberty, Keeping Our Republic. He is asking folks who come to this, who view it, whether or not the American Republic can survive if we lose the very thing that the founders believed made self-governance possible: virtue. Virtue that stems, I will specifically say, from religious conviction. Now, this documentary actually features, I referenced him in the last segment, Victor Davis Hanson, Larry Arnn from Hillsdale College, Roger Kimball, a lot of others, and really kind of exposes and explores the thread here between liberty, faith, and national character. And of course, this is something, the American identity. What is an American? Who is an American? This is a question that we are asking ourselves, left and right. And I think that this, documentaries and books and resources like this, pointing to that thread, saying we need to remember this, that a people of faith and character and virtue are in fact the people that are capable of liberty and self-governance. This is very intrinsically tied together. Because, rather than treating the Constitution as some sort of self-executing document that is just capable of preserving freedom on its own, here you've got folks, I think, rightly arguing the Constitution and the Declaration depend on a virtuous people who understand that their rights originate not from government, but from God. And this is probably preaching to the choir for me to do here. I understand this. I'm fairly sure you understand this, my fellow listener. But there are a lot of folks who have lost this thread, who have moved very far away from the warning that John Adams gave us back in the latter years of the 18th century, in the new era of America. This republic was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the governance of any other. That is what our Constitution was made for. And here in this film, they contrast the current success with the collapse of all other republics that came before us. A very poignant reminder: the United States of America is not invincible. And we point back to Alexis de Tocqueville, this very famous, nearly 2 centuries ago writing, his Democracy in America. That America had a vast network of churches, charities, civic associations, institutions that cultivated habits of responsibility and community. And these voluntary institutions allowed Americans to govern themselves. There was no need for big government. There was no hole for big government to fill, because citizens voluntarily acted with the type of virtue that is required to have ordered liberty. And these institutions were indispensable to American life. And it was a result of Americans' virtue that stems from religion. But what happens when the government co-opts this very role? What happens when people begin to lose that virtue or the connection to our self-governed civic life all around us? Well, now they begin to take things over. Now we begin to give them opportunities to step into a vacuum. So much of what we have seen throughout the 20th century, things happening to us or things that we have allowed, to be a need filled by government. And I think that documentaries like this, from the parts and pieces of it I've seen, again, I need to sit and watch the entire thing. I encourage you to do that with me. Thread of Liberty, Keeping Our Republic. I think this is going to do an excellent job pulling together the full picture for us, because a lot of these things, we look back and complain of our lifetimes, but the plans to create this total state go back much farther than any of us. The progressive movement really getting its heyday under Woodrow Wilson, President Woodrow Wilson, back in the 1910s, before and into World War I. And then, of course, we leap forward. I know most of us familiar with Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal, major growth of government. Of course, Lyndon B. Johnson, the Great Society, under which the welfare state began. It goes back much, much farther. And we have steadily shifted responsibility from families and churches and local communities, volunteers, instead toward the government level, primarily the federal government level. And as those institutions became weak, so has our ability to self-govern. Those institutions once helped sustain that self-governance. They are very rapidly disappearing entirely, and so does our self-governance. There is a specific thread here, and a lot of it goes back to the voluntary seasons of service and the surrender of power. I'm reminded yet again, of course, we talked yesterday at length about a fantastic film you should go see if you haven't, Young Washington. But a lot of this comes back to the example of people like George Washington, who voluntarily surrendered power after the Revolution, who voluntarily left his position as the first president of the United States. My goodness, I mean, they were ready to crown George Washington king. And yet he resigned his commission and returned home. And that virtue that Washington possessed, that virtue we see throughout much of our founding era, is because of virtuous character by people of faith. Washington, a lot of our colonists and the early Americans, they believed humans are bound by something higher than political power that keeps us all in check. If rights come from God, that means our power is temporary and, frankly, rather meaningless in the grand scheme of things. If we remove that conviction, though, it becomes very difficult to create leaders who are actually willing to relinquish power voluntarily. Here's looking at you, some of our quite aged members of the United States Senate. And this is best, of course, exemplified by the rise of the administrative state, this progressive behemoth, the Leviathan that we have seen over the last 100-plus years. There is one simple truth that we need to remember, that films like this, The Thread of Liberty, are going to, I believe, help us educate our fellow family members, friends, coworkers, churchgoers, people who do not really grasp how deep this problem runs and what the solution is. They might look around and understand things are broken, that some of these new socialist-style Democrat candidates for office and office holders are not the solution. But what is the solution? That requires an understanding of what the problem really is and what it goes back to. The founders did not invent self-governance. They simply codified it. But they were able to codify it because self-governance had deep roots in the American colonies, precisely because the national character of our people. The tools that they left us for self-governance are not the be-all, end-all. The virtue of the people is what keeps those things moving, is what allows the Constitution to serve as guardrails for proper government, and what keeps things in line, what serves as an election integrity measure, what serves as a term limit. It is the virtue and the activity of the people. So what will happen? What will happen to our republic when the very thing that makes voluntary self-government disappears, when those institutions completely dissipate from public life? We're witnessing it right now. If we are to restore that self-governance, if we are to restore our Constitution, if we're to restore the republic that we have been gifted by the generations before us, we must restore public morality and virtue, and we must tie that very indefinitely to our national faith. There is a great thread here to be understood as we watch the decline of the United States, as we fight against it in elections and in politics and in policies. We need to understand the true cause and see the real fix. All of these political fixes, all these elections that we can win, these are just Band-Aids on the problem. The nation needs to heal, and that healing comes from a great and virtuous and faith-filled people. I hope that we become that yet again. That starts on a grassroots level with you and me. That one doesn't come from the White House, although I am grateful whenever they point to it.